Okay, recording is on, and if anybody, just so everybody knows, if anybody doesn't want to be recorded, please let me know. And everyone's always free to ask questions. You want to ask questions by voice or just text in the Slack or the Discord channel here. Um, if I don't see it immediately, I'll see it eventually. I check periodically over here to see if anybody's dropped any questions in there. But if Simon wants to keep an eye on it and interrupt me as well if I miss something. So we're just picking up from where we left off last week. We're on part 5 of however many this ends up being. Might be the last one we do on screen, as we were talking about a moment ago. But last time, if we go ahead and play this, we got ourselves to a point where we worked out most of the game mechanics. Puzzles have a relatively simple mechanic, obviously. We have the scattering disabled right now just to make it easy on ourselves to do some testing work, but we can move pieces around, right? We can attach pieces together if they're within a reasonable proximity of where they're supposed to go, then they snap into place and we can move the whole chunks around, and then we can make other chunks and move those chunks around and snap chunks together into bigger chunks. And that took way more work than I think most of the people on watching this thought it would. But we that's most of what makes a puzzle right now, right? Is if I turn scattering back on, if I come back over here and just uncomment the line that enables randomizing the puzzle. And there we go. We got ourselves a nice little jigsaw puzzle, and we could put this together, and voila, we have essentially a puzzle game. At the moment, though, there's a few sort of like infrastructure pieces missing. Like we don't have a way to reset the game once we've done. Like I can stop and restart the Unity editor, right? And that works in the editor, but it's not going to work once we upload it in the region. People would have to like leave the region or log out and come back, and that's not a great mechanic. So we kind of want some way where we can say like, I'm done, re-randomize it so I can do it again. And we want some way to control the camera view. Like we just toss the camera on here, but if we leave that as it is when we upload it, then everybody who logs into the screen is just going to have their camera stolen by this and be looking at the puzzle the whole time they're in the region. So we kind of need a way for this camera to be turned off and on. We need this to be an opt-in somehow. So like, I want to play, I want you to take over my camera rather than just doing it. So there was a discussion about keeping scores, which for a puzzle game would just be like who connected the most pieces, who made the most connections happen. So we want to just kind of add a few basic features there. We might get to like I want to do a different puzzle, so put a different image on there, right? Um, if you wanted to take this further, you could have, this is a 192 piece puzzle. We could generate puzzles of different sizes, which I think Simon actually has already made some puzzles of different sizes. But we could make it so you could swap out the 192 for a 500 piece puzzle and put this image on there, and then let's go. But we won't get to that today. We're just going to kind of focus on getting some basic UI interactivity on here so we can actually have, more of the sort of just like wrapping that you need to make it a game. So how are we going to do that? Well, we've got our camera. We're going to turn that off for now, and we'll make a script to turn it back on later when we need it. And we're going to start by coming over here to our main puzzle object, which we'll want to turn into a prefab eventually. But right now we are just freewheeling it. So eventually this is going to need like a box collider on it for placement, and it's going to need a room furniture component on it, right? And eventually it'll need a virtual good component on it, and then we'll turn it into a prefab, and that's what will let us actually upload it to Sciencebase. But I think most people know how to do that, so we'll not focus on that for this. So what we are going to focus on is we're going to add ourselves a canvas to this so that when the user, is that something else that we don't want to be on all the time, right? So the puzzle canvas, we only want users to see when they've decided, yeah, I want to play this. And so, because otherwise we don't want them walking around the whole region with a window on there that they can't get rid of related to a puzzle that they're not playing. Like that would just be obnoxious. So we need some way for them to opt into playing the puzzle. We're just going to do something real simple here since today is focusing on UI. Then all I'm going to do here is I am just going to make myself a little something that I can click on, and we'll just call it the puzzle joiner cube of mystic energy. And we're just going to add a clickable activator to it. And this is for the moment how we're going to we're going to opt into the puzzle. Probably for the finished version, I would say we could put like, you know, a nice like wooden baseboard or something like flat sort of plinth or something underneath it. Then that would be what you would click on instead to join the puzzle. But we're not really focused on aesthetics at the moment, so we're just going to make this simple and just make something we can click on here. Now, when we click on this, it needs to do something, so we're going to add an event to this, and we're going to drag in our puzzle script, go to our scripting runtime, we're going to say we're going to call script function, and we're just going to say we're going to make a function called onCubeClicked. We'll make that something more interesting later, right? But that means that our puzzle script needs to have a function by that name in it. So we're just going to find a spot here and go to function on cube clicked, and C needs to be capitalized because that matters, right? So we'll fill that in a minute, but we need that in there. We want our canvas to be off by default when the game runs, but we kind of need it on right now to be able to design what it looks like, right? So I'm just going to press F here and zoom out so we can see the whole canvas. And we're just going to make ourselves a quick and dirty little UI panel here. So we're just going to start, going to make a panel. We obviously don't want it filling the entire screen. That's too much. We're planning to have a scoreboard on it, so we probably want to think a vertical panel rather than a horizontal panel. You could do it either way, depending on how you design the UI. But today because I mean, if we have a scoreboard, it's going to be a list, right? It could be a list of a couple of people playing it. It could be a list of 10 people playing it, and so vertical panel makes more sense there for the moment. But what we're just going to do is we're just going to kind of keep it as small and unobtrusive as possible, right? We don't want it taking up like all the room when we mainly just want to be able to see our puzzle. That's going to be our main thing. So for the moment, we're just going to stick this over here. We might move it around later, and we're going to change its anchor so it's attached to the right side of the screen there. That way when we resize the screen, it'll stay stuck there, right? And then we're going to come over here, going to get a good look at this. And we're going to start by adding just a vertical layout group to it, make things easy. And we will just say we're going to want some spacing between elements here. And we're going to want this to go ahead and control the size of the children. And then what do we want underneath there? Well, we're going to want some buttons for sure. So we're going to add a button here. We're looking at the back side of the panel, apparently. Let's zoom ourselves back out here. There we go. All right, so we've got a button. Right now it's gigantic. It fills the whole space because it's the only object in here. But let's call this the quit button, right? Like, just be like, I'm done. I don't want to play anymore. We're going to need one of those. Let's make ourselves another button. We'll keep the quit button at the bottom. So let's make ourselves a reset button. That'll be useful to have. And we're just going to change the text on that to start over, right? And then let's make ourselves we're just going to keep it really super simple and just put a text panel here for the scoreboard. We can just put, you know, everyone's score on a different line. Obviously, a better UI would probably have like a scroll view here, and we would have like row prefabs where we would instantiate every time there was a new user join that, we'd create them a new row with their own sort of object and place in that. But that's going to be a lot of extra scripting, so we're going to not focus on that for today. Like I said, we're just going to do a quick and dirty panel here. So we're going to call this, let's call this scores text, right? We don't need to do a whole lot with that at the moment because all of that is just going to be populated by the script. So we have that. Now that's kind of uneven placement there because like these buttons don't need to be that big, and we really kind of want the score panel to take up more space than that. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a layout element to all of these things. And this lets them sort of decide how big they want to be. So what we're going to do is for our buttons, we're going to give them a preferred height of like 40, right? And then we're going to give our score panel a preferred height of like a lot more than that. I think maybe those went too small. Okay, well, that's their preferred height. Let's set a minimum height on there. You can't go that small. Oops, that's width, not height. Minimum height, 40. Even that seems too big. We'll say minimum height, 25. You prefer to be 40, but you can't go smaller than 25. So that kind of scrunches things down a little bit. This kind of looks ugly with the buttons right up against the panel edges, right? So we can play with that real fast. We can give a little margin around the sides. That's sort of quick and easy cleanup there. If we were going to do this for real, we'd probably want like different button sprites, different panel sprites, right, to kind of clean that up, make it more fun. We'll find some kind of colorful panel to go behind here, right? We might also want to have some kind of header on here, so we might duplicate our score panel, and people will be like, what is this panel floating here? What is that for? Well, we can do the same thing here. We're going to say minimum height of 25, right, so it can't get squished too much. And then we're just going to put puzzle game here. That's kind of squished out of there. So what we're just going to do is turn on best fit for text so that it fills up the amount of the space there as much as it needs to, but not more. And it's also kind of too tall still. There we go. So I'll make that 15 at the top. And so we'll just call this title text. All right, so we got ourselves a quick and dirty little UI here that we only want visible when you're actually joining the game. And then we want a way to start the game over and then to shut all this down, make all this UI and camera stuff go away when we're done playing the game. So that's kind of like the most basic version we have, right? And the scores here are just going to be like, you know, Josh has 5 points. Sorry, my keyboard's fighting me. You know, we could say Simon has 8 points, whatever. We're going to be like very simplistic about this to start off with, just for prototyping. Obviously, we'd want, like I said, we'd want this UI to be a lot more interesting later, but that can be later. So we're going to, while we're at it, score text, we're going to also make this smaller. So we're going to make like font size 11, and then we'll play with that as needed. All right, so we're going to save that, and we don't want this active by default, so we're going to go ahead and turn our canvas off. And I'm just saving a lot because if I hit play and Unity crashes, I want to lose as little as possible there. All right, so we've got all that, but we need to hook all of that up to something. So we're going to do this a couple different ways just so that, you know, there's more than one example here. So one easy way to kind of go like, well, the game has to be in one state when people are playing and a different state when people are not playing would be to use events, right? Not the only way to do it, but we're going to add an event here to our scripting runtime, and we're just going to call it playing. Well, what happens when somebody's playing? Well, we want the canvas to turn on. So if you're playing, then canvas set active. Yep. We also want the camera to turn on when you're playing. So we're going to put the camera in here, and we're also going to make that active. So if the player wants to opt in, we call our playing event, and it kind of sets everything up for us. If they're done playing, then we are going to have another event, and we'll just call this not playing. And if they're not playing, then we don't want these things on. So that makes that nice and simple. Let's go ahead and hook those up real quick. we're going to come over here to our script, and we're just going to add ourselves a little variable called isPlaying, which starts off to be false. You're not playing to when you first load it in. And if you click on our cube here, then what we're going to do is we're just going to say, okay, you clicked on the cube, isPlaying equals not isPlaying. And so that's just going to flip it. If playing is true, it's going to become false. If it was false, then it's going to become true. We're just flipping it back and forth. And so now we're saying if we just flipped it and we are playing, then we're going to call space.host.invoke event playing. So we run that playing event we just made. And if we're not playing, then we do that. And so let's give this a more intelligent name on playing toggle, right? And the reason we're going to do that is because we can then real quickly look at this and say, well, if this puzzle joiner cube over here, right, on playing toggle is actually an opt in and out, right? If we click on it, it'll actually toggle us in and out of the game rather than simply joining us to the game. We can actually reuse the exact same command for our quit button here, right? We can come over here and we can say this, and we're scripting runtime, call script. Now, we don't have to worry about the fact that this is a toggle because this quit button is only visible if you're playing, right? So if you click this quit button, the only possible situation is you're already playing. And so the only possible outcome is to toggle this to off. I'm not playing anymore. So even though this is a toggle, and when you click on the cube, that will turn it off and on and off and on and off and on, the quit button will only ever turn it off, even though it's the exact same function. And then we're going to add a function for our reset here. So we're going to come over here, scripting runtime, and we're going to go on reset button, right? So we need a button for that. We're going to say function on reset button. We'll work on that later. But okay, so we should have the ability now that when we play it, save this again just in case. This is not Unity's first run, so it should be okay. There we go. So I click on this, and we're probably going to need to adjust that camera position or that camera view a bit, right? Maybe we, instead of adjusting the position, maybe we want to give it a wider field of view here. Instead of 60, maybe we want it to be like 80 or something. So we got to play with the camera and kind of get what we want it to be. But we now have a way to opt in and opt out of the game. I can say I'm done here, right? And it's handy to have even though the cube can toggle you in and out, it's handy to have the I done button on the screen because you may not be able to see the cube when the camera takes over your perspective here. Like I could force it out with the fly cam, right? Probably. But that's not really user friendly. So it's just nice to have that on the screen there, having another way to get yourself out of this situation. Like, okay, my view is locked in here. Maybe I don't know how to do it. I can obviously see a button here, say I'm done with that. Someday I'll change my staging avatar so it's not this giant monster, but you know, monsters like puzzles too. All right, so we've got that ability. We can go in and out, but obviously this is not correct. None of this other stuff is dynamic. The start over button doesn't do anything yet. The scores don't do anything yet, but we're on our way here. So let's just look at how we're going to hook up the scores here. So events get us in and out, but they're not the whole picture, right? So we're going to go to object references, and we're going to add a new object reference because if I need to be able to change the text in a UI element, I have to have a reference to that UI element so that I can get a hold of it easy. I could do some, you know, cheesy cheat way of doing it where I just say like, okay, I know that it's called scores text, right? So I could come in here and I could be like, all right, so I know that I have a scores text object someplace, and it's going to be um, somewhere under the same, underneath the root object is going to be an object called scores text. So find that. And you can do that, but that's really inefficient for a lot of reasons. You have to be careful about it. For one, if you look over here, the UI actually isn't a child of the script. The script is a sibling of the canvas, not a parent of the canvas. So this wouldn't actually find anything in there. It'd actually have to do like my object.parent to go up one and then look in all of his children to find that text. And then that's counting on, well, nobody's ever going to rename that, surely, or move it around someplace where it has a different parentage. And on top of that, sort of like just being unorganized, this is also really inefficient. Like it costs computation time for Unity to search all of this, and especially when you consider the fact that the actual puzzle itself is in here. So that's a 192 piece puzzle, and that each of those pieces actually has multiple sub objects. So this one object right here is like 500 Unity objects, right? And so if we're asking you to search the whole thing and find some object called scores text somewhere in here, then even though this looks simple, this is like searching through 500 objects to find one with a specific name. And that's just a really inefficient waste of computer power, of frame time, right? Because anything you do that increases the amount of work done per frame, it means like, oh, that's going to add extra lag to that loading. Like on load up, it's going to have to search all 500 of these objects to find something. That's just kind of wasting everyone's time, literally. So what we're instead going to do is just drag our score text object over here and make a reference out of it, right? So that way we just know where it is. If it gets moved, if it gets renamed, doesn't matter, because all the script cares about is the name of the reference, not the name of the object. So we can come over here now and we can just change this to space.host.getReference scores text. And that's all we really care about. We can even go a little bit deeper and we can say like, okay, I don't actually care about that object because that's what that's getting us, right? Is this actually isn't getting us the text box, it's getting us the object that the text box is attached to. And sometimes maybe you care about that. In this case, we really don't. We actually just want the text box. Nothing else really matters. So we're actually going to say that this actually gets the object and then gets the UI text component off of that object. And that's what we're storing in scores text. And that way in the future, if I want to change the text of this, instead of always having to do scores text.UI text.text equals new scores, right? Because I would have to do that everywhere that I wanted, every time I wanted to change that. Maybe that's not a lot of places, maybe it is. But because this UI text is now up here, this is not needed, and I can just do scores text.text equals new scores whenever I want to update that directly. And that may seem silly, but that actually does save a little bit of processing time as well per frame. If you kind of cache that, it's a little tiny bit. You see a typo. Oh yes, space is not correct. Well spotted. That would have become apparent the first time I run that, and got a nil error out of that, because Lua is very forgiving on names, so it would have assumed that there's just something called spth, and it would have been fine with that, but it would have not been fine with me trying to access the .host parameter of spth, because I've never defined that before. All right. That's something like we talked about in the past. It's always okay for the right to be nil. It's never okay for the left to be nil when outside of a dot operator. All right, so we've got that. We've got a reference to our scores text. So let's kind of set a sort of sane state on startup, right? Now that we have that, we can come down here like to our init function and say scores.text equals no game currently being played, right? We could do something like that. And when we start this up, we can't really see it yet, but if we click here, we can see like, oh, okay, there's, nothing going on there. But since I opted into the game, obviously there should be something going on there. So we need to fix that part of it. We're going to come over here and we are going to keep a list someplace. We'll make ourselves a little table. We'll call it player scores, right? And just to, because there's going to be a lot of places that we might need to update the player scores from, we're going to write ourselves a little function here that says function update player scores, right? So anytime we want to take what's in that table and put it on the UI, we can call this function. And so we're just going to be like, the text is, nothing, and we're going to build it. So we're going to loop through all of the scores that we have, however many there are. So that's player scores. And then for every player score, we're just going to append it onto our text. So this is quick and dirty. So we're going to say the text equals the text plus we're going to add, actually just directly add player scores dot player. We'll assume player name is one of the variables there. And then we're going to be like, okay, your score then goes into player scores dot score. That's probably something that is kept in the scores. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're just going to put a line break on here. And that way, if we add more items to this, then they'll appear on separate lines. So what we can do there is really it needs to be updated based on the network because we want the scores to be synchronized to everyone. So this is actually something that the server script is supposed to handle. So if we go up to the server script and we say, okay, the server needs to keep track of all of this, but also keep everyone in the scene up to date. So we're going to add, we have the server script currently is like keeping track of who's moving stuff and what the puzzle currently looks like. And this server script is kind of a stub right now. We did a little bit of it on part 2, I think it was, and everybody hated it. So we're not going to spend too much time on here. But it does need to keep track of scores. This is one of the things that we'll kind of finish in the background because it's very networking heavy and everybody thought the networking part was dry was, I think, the word used. So we're going to have this, but we're going to say, all right, so we're going to have a player joined event, and we're going to have a player left event, and then we are going to have a player scored event for when they actually got a new score. So real quickly, we'll just try and run through this. Player joined, we just need to make sure that they're in the list, right? There's a bunch of different ways to kind of arrange this information efficiently for large sets, but this is not going to be a large set. So we're just going to do it quick and dirty. We're just going to first make sure that they didn't leave and come back, because then we don't want them to appear on here several times. So we are just going to do local found equals false, and we're going to run through all of our player scores, and we're going to say if player scores dot player ID, let's see, player scores S dot player ID equals the current player who just joined. Then we don't need to do anything here. We can say found is true. We found them, they exist. However, if we didn't find them, they're not currently a player, then let's go ahead and put them into our player table, right? So we're going to have player ID equals whatever the player is, player name. This is something that the uh, client is actually going to have to send us, because the server can't see the scene. It doesn't know who's in here. It does have a little bit of understanding of the avatars in the scene, but it doesn't, I think, have the name, it just has the IDs. So we're going to assume that the player name actually came from the client when they sent it. And then obviously their score is going to start off at 0. They haven't done anything yet. So we've got that. Player left, not doing anything right now for this, right? If they left, oh well, they still have, if they come back, they'll still have found the same number of pieces. So we're just going to remember their score. That'd be useful for some other features later, but right now we're not going to do anything in this. And then if they score, then we kind of need to do the same thing here. We can assume they're in the list, but we have to still find where in the list they are, right? So we're just going to go through the list. We actually don't even need this if next. They have to be in there if they've scored. So if they scored, we find them, and then real quick and dirty, we're just going to say score equals score plus 1, right? So we're going to say, hey, you scored. If we get a scored event, that means you connected a new piece. That's only going to be one piece. So we're just going to assume we're going to add one score to it. But then we also need to tell everyone, hey, a score was made. So we are going to add a new response here, right? And to add a new outgoing response to everyone, we just add it to our everyone's table, and that goes out down here. And then we're going to have a message here that says scores updated. And then we just need to send along the scores that we know about. So every time the server, and actually this needs to go out as well anytime a new user is added to the scores table. So anytime we change our scores table on the server, we're just telling everybody, hey, everybody, here's the new updated scores table. It's really brute force. Just here's the whole table. We don't ever expect it to be a big table, right? Even if 10 people were playing the same puzzle, that'd be a pretty small table. So we're just going to shoot the whole thing out the network to everyone. And this is complaining. So obviously I use puzzle scores up here, and I use player scores down here. So we're just going to update all of these to be consistent. Otherwise, that's not going to work. All right. I just used the wrong name. Okay, so that's the server side of it, more or less. Super quick and dirty, super simple. Player joined, make sure they're in the table. Player scored, increment their score by 1. And in both cases, send out the new scores to everybody on the client side to get that. And so we just have to go to our network handler here, handles networking messages. And one thing we need to do also, actually we'll do that in the update piece later, but we need to come down here and we need to say if scores get updated, then I am just going to make my scores match whatever the server says the scores are supposed to be, and then call my update player scores, which takes those new scores that I have now and just puts them on the UI for me. All right, so we have that. And now we just need to send the appropriate events to the server. So in our onPlaying function, if I start playing, I've got to send to network. Is that what I called it? Yep, send to network. And this does need to be server only. We only want the server to get that. So we are going to send a command equals player joined. All right, and we got to send the player name along. So that's my player. We'll send username, although you might want to send display name as an option instead. But we'll just make sure they got that. And I don't need to add the player ID because player ID is automatically appended to every outgoing network message. So that's in there for me. The only extra information I need to send along with this is my name because the server doesn't have that. So I've got that. And then likewise, if I leave the game, player left, my name's not important here. My ID is already going along with it, so we don't need to do anything else there. Now, in theory, whenever I come over here and I play this, puzzle scatters, if I didn't make an error someplace, we'll get our console up here, clear that, join the game. Something's not quite right because I didn't get my message back. Looks like. Do I? Oh, I don't have debugging in here. Let me add debugging and see if I get this back. I think I might know what this is doing here, but let's just output it to the console so we can see it. We'll join this here. Go down to the bottom. Yep, so we did get the message from the server back correctly. Scores updated. You can see down here. Scores, there's my player ID, there's my player name, current score 0. It's just not calling this. This is what we're just going to do is we're just going to move this over here for a second. And see if that solves our problem. All right. Scores updated, not happening. What am I doing wrong here? You are getting back server message. It is serialized correctly. Let's see, command scores updated. Oh, I think I know what's going on here. Right, so this is me being silly on when I copied a server script over from before, is that the server can send back more than one message at a time, and we're only expecting one message on the client side, so we just have to account for that. Really, the way this should be is that there should be a loop here. So we should be d equals 1, however many data there is. This can go back in here. Sorry, doing a little live debugging here. We've never tested this in an actual networked scenario, so it's not. Okay, that should go there. And then all these places where we have D, it should actually be data D. So like that, and that, and that. We'll just replace all of these real quick. Right, all right. So in theory, that's what we're missing. Just restart this. Well, we're almost there. Okay, so the networking works now. But our score updater is complaining. So let's see what our score updater is complaining about. Attempting to concatenate a nil value at line 225. Where's update player scores? Oh, right. I did the same thing down here. I forgot an S. It's got to be player S scores because we're in a loop. Let's restart that. And it's not complaining now, but it's also still not updating. So let's see what, oh, right. It's not updating because I didn't actually put scores text equals the text. I made the string and then didn't actually put it onto the UI. So that part's important. Okay. Hey, there I am. I have 0 points. So that was a lot. We got lost a little bit there in doing a little bit of debugging, but we'll just go back over that real quick. So whenever we say we want to play, in addition to calling the event that turns on our canvas and our camera, we're also sending a message to the server saying, hey, I'm in, I want to play. Here's my name, here's my ID, put me in the game. And then if I decide I'm done playing, in addition to turning off the canvas and the camera, I'm telling the server, hey, I'm out, leave me alone. And then the server, whenever it gets these messages, either adds a new person to the table if they're not already in there, or increments or does nothing for leaving them out right now. But then it's going to send out a message to everyone who's currently connected saying, hey, Josh joined the game, which means the scores table now needs to show him. He doesn't have any 0 point. He doesn't have any points yet, so it's going to be Josh 0, but he needs to be there so you know he's playing. And then we need to do the part where is it so when that message goes out from the server, then we just take that, whatever the server says the scores are, server's the boss, server's the authority. So we just believe the server, whatever it says the scores are supposed to be, we accept that, and then we just update it to our UI. And so the only part that's really missing here is now incrementing the scores. Like if I make a play and I successfully connect pieces, then I want my point. So what we're going to do there is we're going to take a network message and we're going to go up here to our dropped event, right? So drag ended, when we move a piece and we let it go, our drag ended event gets called. And that's what checks to see like, hey, did you actually drop this near something that I should connect to? And if that's the case, we snap it together, right? Well, that should be a point. So all we really need to do is over here in our dragged event, you say drag ended, hey, you dropped something. We already did all the work to find out that you dropped it near something that was important. We already did all the work to actually connect it all up. So the only thing that's missing is us letting the server know that that's what I did. So I'm just going to add a player scored event here, just send out to the server. You know, the server says anytime I get a player scored event, I increment that user score by 1, and then I tell everyone about it. So that should be all I have to do to begin scoring points. Is just add that call there. So I'm going to come down here, I'm going to go ahead and play this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and opt into our game, which turns on our canvas and our camera. Real quick here, let's just make that camera view a little bit more usable because it's kind of can't see most of the puzzle. So we're going to move this up a little bit, and then we're also going to give it a little bit wider of a field of view. So we're going to save that. And all right, so we're going to opt in. The camera, this is a yeah, there we go. The virtual cameras are a little bit finicky in the editor pack. But now we can see our whole puzzle. So I've got this here. I should be able to start putting stuff together. Although this is right, so I can drag these pieces around. It's making me click on the floor, which is kind of obnoxious. What we may have developed ourselves a problem here. Why are you not letting me drag pieces around all of a sudden? Let's see what's going on here. So I click a piece, there's a piece, I can drag it around, all right. Clear, I can click a piece, drag it around. It's being a little bit finicky, but let's do this. I think we're getting, since we fixed the networking, we're getting some messages in that we weren't getting before, and it's probably causing some weirdness there. So let's see. Let's just turn off, just to test the scoring, let's just turn off the scattering again real quick. Just because that makes it easier for me to figure out what pieces go together. Why are you being very picky about me doing this? All right, so we got those. Now, in theory, when I snap these together, there, I have a point. So I got 1 point over here because I made one connection. Just moving a piece around doesn't do anything for me. That's fine. I'm not connecting it to anything, but anytime I grab a piece and then connect it, my score just went up by another one. So now I've made two connections, and I should be able to drag this piece over here and connect it again. And the super group that I've made, that's a new connection that I made, so that's 3. I'm not double counting things. It's like I connected 2 pieces to 2 other pieces. That doesn't give me 2 points. I only just made 1 new connection, and that's all that we're scoring on is those new connections. I don't get a free point for every other piece that was connected behind that new connection that I made, because those connections were already made previously. So we have a basic scoring here. And we have introduced ourselves a little bug where now I have to double click to start dragging things, but I'll figure that part out later. All right, so we've got that. And we're going to, so we have the ability to opt in, we have the ability to get points, and we have the ability to say, I'm done, let me out, turn off my camera and my canvas, and I can go back at any time and see that my points are still there. So that's all working as we expect it to. Even if I had to leave for some reason, come back, I still want to keep my points, and it's still relevant to the other people playing the game that even though I'm gone, I was there and I made 3 connections. So, you know, there's a finite number of points to be made in the game, so you want to know where all those points went, even if it was for somebody that isn't actually playing anymore. So then we just need the start over, right? We need to think about how do we start this over if we reset it. And that's a little bit more complicated than it sounds. So the main thing about starting it over is you would think that that's just re-randomizing everything, right? Just throw everything back out, let people, you know, just start moving the pieces around again. The problem is that we have, as a course of playing, we've built up a bunch of relationships in the puzzle, right? Anytime we build a chunk, we put 2 or more pieces together, we've formed a relationship there. And if we're going to reset them, we actually have to break all of those bonds first before we scatter the puzzle back out again. So let's say that on a reset button, it might actually be fairly intensive. This is one of those things that's probably going to have to be a coroutine because this is a 192-piece puzzle. That's already quite a lot to do on 1 frame. If we have to reparent all 192 pieces, that's a lot. If it's a 1,000-piece puzzle, that's a whole lot. So we're probably going to want to have ourselves a reset coroutine here. So we're not trying to reset the entire puzzle all at once. And our reset thing is we're going to say, well, most basic level, start a coroutine, which is actually space.host.start coroutine, reset coroutine, right? So what do we do with that? Well, we're going to have to go through all of our pieces, every piece that we know about, which is stored in puzzle info. We built that up when the script initialized. So we're going to loop through all of puzzle info. And we're going to say if puzzle info p.parent is not nil, then this is a relationship we need to end, right? That means that piece is currently part of a bigger chunk, and we need to unchunk it. We need to take it out. So we need to know what it goes back to. And I don't know that we have a reference to this. There's a couple ways around this. We have puzzle. Okay, actually, we do have a reference to it. We actually have a reference to the root of the puzzle. That's good. So that's just called the puzzle. That makes things easier. We already did that. So in this case, we're just going to say puzzle info p dot container set parent back to the puzzle rather than to the chunk that it's on. And we also need to clear its parent so it no longer thinks it is part of a chunk. And then we're going to say for every 20 pieces that we look at on the puzzle, then we're going to take a little break here and do more work on the next frame instead. And then at the very end, when we're done unparenting everything, well, then that's when we go ahead and do our scatter. We made sure that all the pieces weren't connected first, and then we can just scatter them back out again. So there's that. The only other thing we really need to do, like for this super quick and dirty version, is the server needs to know that it's been reset, so it can reset all the scores back to 0, right? So we're just going to let that know that, hey, puzzle was reset, right? Do what you must for that. And so for the server, puzzle reset, we're just going to go through all the scores of the people who are currently playing. Every single one of them, and set their score back to 0. And then let everyone know, hey, we zeroed out all the scores. Well, we'd want something more complex eventually for the final game, right? So we would, part of why we have this puzzle left here right now is we would want to keep track of not only what people's scores are, but who is currently playing, so that down here when we did the reset, if we're going through the reset and it's somebody who's currently playing, we just zero out their score but keep them. And if it's somebody who's not currently playing, then we would actually just remove them from the scores entirely for a new game, because there's no point for them being in a new game. We're only keeping them for an old game because they might have made some points while they were playing the previous game. But we're not going to worry about that for the moment here. So if we go back to this and play this, and opt in, and I should be able to come down here. Well, first of all, I should be able to just click start over and have it scatter all the pieces around. Nothing was in a relationship at the moment, but you know, I can just go ahead and choose to do the scatter now. That makes it kind of real hard on myself to make some points here and test that. But let's just do this so it's not scattered again. Opt in here. And all right, so we're gonna get a little closer here, and let's just make some pieces here. So that I can see I got myself got a point on my UI. I've got a chunk that I can move around here. I'm gonna make another chunk over here. So now I've got 2 points and 2 chunks. And if I look at these, which we can see, one of them was piece 61. Right, so if I go over here and look at piece 61, I can see that piece 61 is actually a child of piece 73, and that's exactly what we don't want when we reset it. We want that relationship broken back up and restored back into a whole incomplete puzzle where basically every piece is its own chunk instead of belonging to another chunk. So if I watch piece 61 over here, when I reset, this should no longer be part of piece 73. So I reset this, and I can see that piece 61 is no longer part of piece 73. If I scroll down here, I can find it at the bottom of the list. It did, in fact, both of the pieces, 61 and 121, which were previously parts of chunks, have been restored to the whole main puzzle. And so now all 192 pieces are back under the main puzzle. They're all scattered around, and I can go ahead and start moving pieces around and start building new pieces. Those don't go together, obviously. Another top piece. Nope, that doesn't go there. That doesn't belong to anybody. As you can see, another top piece over here. One of these is bound to connect sooner or later. This is a side piece, and let's see here. Do I see any more top pieces? It's going to be like dark blue. That's a top piece. Do you connect to anybody? No? Well, someday I'll find a top piece that actually connects to people the way it's supposed to. That's another side piece. I need another dark blue one. Here we go. Here's another dark blue one down here. Do you connect to anybody? Let's see. No. No, I don't think so. Oh, yep, he connects there. All right, so I did make a new chunk there, and we're back off and running, and we can just do the whole puzzle over again. And of course, every time we do that, the pieces are all being randomized into new places, but it's still the same puzzle. So the next step of this would be, well, I did that puzzle. I want a different puzzle. I want a different picture to do, right? And so that's relatively easy. We would just find, we've got our material here that contains the puzzle, and you can kind of see this in real time. Like if I wanted to, I could just come over here and swap this out, just put a new image on our material, and suddenly we have a whole new puzzle to work on. I don't even know what this one looks like, but that one looks like it'd probably be pretty difficult to put together. So we can just kind of swap this out. And so that's really all that there is to changing the picture, is just grabbing the shared material off of one of the pieces and swapping its texture for something else. And that's not too difficult to do in code, but you'd want to attach a list of what textures do I have? What are my options that I want to give to the person? This is one of those areas where, like, if you're uploading this to Sciencebase, then you have to think about like the copyright on those pictures. Do I have permission to use those pictures? You may want to think about like, how do I monetize these pictures, right? So it might be that you want to sell like puzzle packs. Like I sold you the puzzle game, and now I want to sell you like puzzle DLC add-ons where you can be like, oh yeah, the base puzzle game comes with 10 pictures that you can use, right? Maybe I'll sell you a pack with 10 more. Maybe they're themed pictures. Maybe you like space stuff. So I sell you a pack of 10 space puzzle images specifically. And you know, that's just, that may sound like just, putting a bunch of images together, but there has to be some code and some infrastructure behind there to um, to actually work with the puzzle games. In order for me to buy a pack of puzzle images and have them show up, like maybe I've got a drop down on my UI here where I pick pictures from. Um, we might be able to do that real quick. In order to have that work with something bought off the store and added onto it, there would have to be code behind there that goes like, hey, I'm a puzzle expansion pack. I need to connect to the puzzle game in my region and let it know that it's got these options available. And then you have to think about like, okay, well, if that's not part of the base game, I have to make sure I network that puzzle change to everyone and make sure everyone can see the same image, even though the puzzle owner is the only one who bought it, right? That's usually relatively simple, just because like the puzzle expansion would probably also be an object added to the scene. Like I've got to put down my puzzle game, then I put down my puzzle pack, and the puzzle pack would be invisible, but it would still be an object in the scene. So it would automatically load that asset for everyone in the scene because it was there. So uh, but then you'd have to be careful about like, okay, well, I don't control which order those load in. So if the puzzle loads and it's looking for a particular image out of a pack, and that pack hasn't finished loading in the scene yet, well, I've got to wait for that pack to load rather than just throwing an error and giving up because I can't find it yet. It'll be here. Just give it another 2 seconds, for it to load. So there's a lot of things you kind of have to think about when you're adding that in there. And if people are interested, uh, you could stop other people putting puzzle packs in, or you could decide that that's okay. Somebody paid for it. But yeah, people might share. They might go to each other's regions and put down their own puzzle packs there, and that way, maybe you only want it to work in regions where the puzzle game and the puzzle pack are owned by the same person. or maybe only in regions where the region owner is the same person that puts down the puzzle pack in the first place. You can kind of think about, yeah, you might want to think about, like, just from a monetization perspective. If you're like, how do I make the most money from this? Well, you probably don't want people, sharing, buying it once and then just, infinitely essentially redistributing it to all the available regions. So yeah, there's stuff like that you'd have to consider from like a commercial perspective. How do I want to restrict this so that, everybody has to buy a copy for their own puzzle instead of buying one copy and using it on everyone's puzzle? But that's not a ton of work. It's just kind of like deciding what your policy is, and then there's a little bit of code that can go in there to be like, okay, but you know, in this case, yes. In this case, no. I won't. I won't. If it's a situation where you're like, I don't want this to work, then the expansion pack just never tells the puzzle that it's there. The expansion pack goes down and goes, oh, I shouldn't work in this region. This is not a region owned by the person who owns me. So I'm just going to do nothing. I just won't tell the puzzle I'm here. The puzzle will never know that all these images are sitting here because I just refuse to load. I refuse to instantiate myself into the region in a way that the puzzle could make use of it. So that's relatively simple to do. Again, it's mostly just a policy thing. But we only have like 10 minutes left here, so I'm probably just going to leave it there. We only got a very basic UI going, but if people want to do more about how would we do a puzzle pack, and kind of the monetization around that, how would we add in some base images to switch between, and then how would we add like expansion pack images to switch between? I'm happy to do that as a topic. If people want to do a part 6, even though we're still technically working on the puzzle, this stuff is universal, right? These sort of UI principles, things like having expansion packs, adding features into the region, making sure everything's loaded first. These are all things that you can apply to anything. It doesn't have to be a puzzle. It doesn't even have to be a game. It can be anything that needs a UI, anything that you want to add an expansion pack to. We're using the puzzle as a test bed for these features, right? But you can use them, the same basic feature on anything. Does anybody have any questions? I know it doesn't feel like we did a lot in the last hour and change, because all we really have to show for it is this little UI here. But that's unfortunately the nature of the UI and networking, and we had to do some code behind the scenes to make what's a basic UI do something useful for us. It's not pretty. Printing it up later is easy. Swapping out some sprites, deciding on what colors look like and the graphics and things like that. So that's relatively straightforward. Yeah, we have a way for people to opt in and out, for scores to be tracked and presented to everyone in the scene in a way that everyone can see each other's scores. And we have a way to restart our puzzle without logging out and logging back in. So we took it a fair bit of ways towards being more of a complete game experience and less of a proof of concept, with just being able to move and connect pieces around. But yeah, another hour, another little bit more accomplished. If nobody has any questions on that, then I will just leave it there for today. I don't see any questions in chat, so I'm just going to go ahead and end the recording then. And thank you all for coming, and have a great Friday and a great weekend.